Have you ever wondered why some people seem to move through the world untouchable, their presence bending reality around them, while the rest of humanity flounders in the shadows of their own weakness? Why some rise effortlessly, while others, equally talented, are crushed beneath the weight of mediocrity? This is not a question of luck, nor is it a question of morality. It is a question of understanding the machinery of power, a machinery that has existed since the dawn of civilization, carefully observed, analyzed, and recorded by those few who dared to see the world not as they wished it to be, but as it truly is. Machiavelli was one of them, and in his forbidden writings lie lessons so profound, so unsettling, that societies have spent centuries trying to suppress them. The lessons are not about goodness or virtue. They are about survival, domination, and the ruthless calculus of influence. And if you are willing to step past fear, past comfort, past the illusions that the world insists are sacred, you can learn them, internalize them, and wield them. Power begins in the mind, long before it manifests in wealth, status, or physical conquest. The world conditions people to seek approval, to crave validation, to react to stimuli rather than shape them. Most drift through life, tethered to emotions, trapped by impulse, unaware that the very nature of human behavior is predictable, measurable, manipulable. Machiavelli understood that mastery of self precedes mastery over others. He observed that the ruler who cannot control his own fear, desire, or anger is doomed to be a puppet, moved by forces he cannot see. To rise above this, you must first cultivate internal sovereignty, the ability to observe your thoughts without being consumed by them, to feel your emotions without being compelled to act, to command your inner world with the same ruthlessness. You will one day command the outer world. The transformation begins with a willingness to see yourself as a being of instinct and intellect, a being whose potential has been wasted by sentiment and naivety. The first step is the brutal acknowledgement of your own weaknesses. Most avoid this truth because it is uncomfortable. They deny their fears, justify their failures, and ignore the impulses that undermine them. Machiavelli argued that such avoidance is the beginning of ruin. To dominate others, you must first understand the precise mechanisms of your own mind, where doubt lurks, where temptation thrives, where anger clouds judgment. You must dissect every part of your psyche with surgical precision, identifying patterns of failure and weakness as clearly as you would map the battlefield before a campaign. This internal audit is not an exercise in self-pity, but a preparation for conquest. Emotions are tools, not masters. Anger can be explosive, or it can be channeled into strategy. Fear can paralyze, or it can illuminate the edges of opportunity. Desire can consume, or it can drive creation. To wield these forces, you must observe them impartially, detach yourself from their influence, and then decide how to deploy them. Most people live as slaves to feeling. The Machiavellian learns to be its master. Once internal mastery is achieved, external influence becomes inevitable, because the world cannot dominate what has been disciplined within. But self-mastery is only the beginning. Machiavelli knew that influence over others depends more on perception than reality. People do not respond to truth, they respond to interpretation. They judge based on fragments, assumptions, and emotion. The world is a theater, and every interaction is a stage. Your task is to craft the performance, highlighting strengths, concealing weaknesses, and presenting an image that commands respect, admiration, or fear. Those who fail in this art are consumed by misunderstanding. Those who master it become architects of reality itself. The subtlety lies in understanding that people are driven by ego, desire, fear, and insecurity. Forces as predictable as the tides. The ambitious cannot resist opportunity. The insecure cannot resist validation. The envious cannot resist proximity to power, and the fearful cannot resist safety. By observing these impulses, you can anticipate behavior, manipulate outcomes, and align others with your will without overt coercion. It is not deception in the crude sense. It is strategic positioning, placing others where their inclinations serve your objectives. Internal mastery and perceptual control converge into presence. Presence is not loudness, display, or aggression. It is the quiet gravitational force that makes people adjust themselves in your orbit without realizing it. It is composure under chaos, clarity amidst confusion, patience amidst impatience. Most people mistake noise for authority, reaction for power. Machiavelli understood that true dominance is felt, not announced. When you enter a room, energy shifts. When you speak, others listen before they judge. When you remain silent, they fill the gap with their own insecurity, revealing intentions they would otherwise hide. The presence of power is not a performance. It is an unyielding axis around which the world aligns. But power is never unchallenged. Those who ascend are scrutinized, envied, and tested. Herein lies the first of Machiavelli's banned lessons. You must embrace being misunderstood. People fear what they cannot fully comprehend. They resent what they cannot control. As you grow in clarity, strength, and influence, some will attempt to bind you with expectation, others with judgment, and many with subtle sabotage. Their attacks will be indirect, disguised as concern, advice, or loyalty. The Machiavellian anticipates this, recognizing that dissent is natural, envy is inevitable, and misunderstanding is unavoidable. To navigate power successfully, you must remain impervious to the opinions of those who cannot perceive the strategy behind your actions. The second banned lesson is the cultivation of strategic silence. Most people speak to fill space, to assert themselves, to convince others of their virtue. Silence, when wielded correctly, forces others to reveal their nature. The insecure talk excessively, the envious project, the ambitious disclose intentions prematurely. By withholding words, you allow others to betray themselves, to reveal weaknesses, to provide advantage. Silence is not passivity, it is a weapon, precise and potent. Third is the acceptance of necessary cruelty. Morality is often an obstacle to power. Machiavelli observed that hesitation in enforcing consequences, weakness in eliminating threats, and indulgence in sentiment over strategy lead inevitably to downfall. Cruelty, when applied decisively and selectively, stabilizes authority. It is not indiscriminate violence, but the cold calculus of necessity, a strike at the right time to secure loyalty, to prevent betrayal, to enforce clarity. The world rewards action, not compassion disguised as indecision. Fourth is the mastery of perception. The world responds to what is believed, not what is true. A ruler who appears strong inspires obedience. One who appears generous inspires gratitude. One who appears indifferent inspires fear. The careful construction of reputation is as important as the reality behind it. Those who fail to cultivate their image are enslaved by the assumptions of others. Those who control perception bend the world to their will. Fifth is the understanding of human predictability. Despite complexity, people act in patterns. Desire drives action, fear inhibits, ambition manipulates, envy corrupts. To recognize these patterns is to read the future in human behavior, to anticipate moves, to preempt threats, and to convert obstacles into tools. Few can see it, those who do act with devastating precision. Sixth is the prioritization of internal over external control. The man who cannot command himself cannot command the world. The emotions he does not master will betray him. The impulses he indulges will destroy him. Mastery of self precedes mastery of others, and it is the foundation on which all lasting power is built. Seventh is the cultivation of strategic alliances. Not friendships, not bonds of sentiment, but relationships grounded in mutual advantage. Loyalty rooted in emotion collapses under pressure. Loyalty rooted in calculated benefit survives storms. A Machiavellian chooses companions, advisors, and allies not for affection, but for alignment, influence, and utility, cutting ties when alignment no longer serves the greater strategy. Eighth is the embrace of calculated darkness, not evil, but the acceptance of instincts society calls improper: ambition, ruthlessness, assertiveness, domination. To suppress these is to weaken oneself. To channel them is to rise. Darkness is the engine beneath the visage of civility. The world punishes the naive, it rewards the cunning. Those who refuse to command their inner shadows remain prey to the external ones. You are at the threshold now. To proceed is to accept that the world is not a place of fairness, nor of morality, but of strategy, perception, and consequence. You are being offered forbidden knowledge, a map into the architecture of human behavior, a blueprint for ascent. Once understood, it cannot be unlearned. Once applied, it cannot be ignored. The question is no longer theoretical. Will you step fully into the machinery of power or retreat to the comfort of ignorance, where illusions still soothe, but opportunity decays? The lessons await, unvarnished and uncompromising. and the journey begins in the shadows of your own mind, where fear is tested, clarity is forged, and the first spark of dominance is lit. The path of Machiavelli is not for the faint-hearted. It is the path of transformation, strategy, and relentless psychological clarity. It is the awakening to a reality that few dare to face, and fewer still survive. Once you have begun to confront the machinery of your own mind, the world begins to reveal itself with brutal honesty. You notice the subtle shifts in posture when someone is lying, the twitch of impatience when they are envious, the hesitation when fear constrains action. Machiavelli observed that human behavior is as predictable as the rising sun, yet most people move through life blind to the patterns that govern their interactions. They speak freely, trust too easily, and react impulsively, never perceiving the forces that guide them. But when you begin to see clearly, you realize that every word, every gesture, every silence carries meaning, a key to leverage, a pathway to influence, a lever to shift reality in your favor. This is where the second tier of forbidden knowledge emerges, the subtle art of control through perception. Power is less about strength and more about the reality others believe you inhabit. If people see you as decisive, they follow without question. If they see you as indecisive, they hesitate and manipulate. If they see you as ambitious, they either align or fear. If they see you as weak, they exploit without remorse. The most cunning of rulers understood that the objective world is malleable, but the perceived world is more consequential. Manipulate perception, and you manipulate outcomes without lifting a finger. Subtlety becomes a weapon sharper than any sword, and patience becomes an ally more reliable than the strongest army. Observation is the first step, but mastery of information is the next. Machiavelli recognized that knowledge is power only when applied strategically. The man who knows the desires, fears, and motivations of others can anticipate their moves, preempt their attacks, and guide them to act in ways that advance his own agenda. Yet information must be guarded fiercely. Revealing too much weakens you. Revealing too little allows chaos to spread unchecked. The ideal is selective disclosure, revealing enough to influence, concealing enough to remain untouchable. Those who overexpose themselves are vulnerable. Those who underexpose themselves remain invisible. You walk the fine line between presence and mystery, between influence and intimidation, understanding that every detail shared, every word spoken, every silence observed is a calculated placement of energy in the social field. The manipulation of perception extends beyond words. Machiavelli noted that power is communicated through presence, the silent gravity that compels attention, the composure that forces respect, the unwavering posture that suggests competence and inevitability. Most people mistake volume for authority, reaction for power, noise for dominance. The Machiavellian understands that true authority is invisible until acknowledged. It is the quiet assurance that your actions, decisions, and even silences signal control, and that control attracts attention, loyalty, and fear in equal measure. You become a fulcrum around which events pivot, a silent axis of influence, and the world bends subtly toward you even before you act. But with perception comes the necessity of unpredictability. Predictable patterns are vulnerabilities. Those who act in expected ways can be controlled, anticipated, and neutralized. To maintain dominance, you must be inscrutable, alternating patience with decisive action, engagement with withdrawal, warmth with coldness, generosity with indifference. Unpredictability is not randomness. It is deliberate deviation designed to keep observers off balance, unsure whether they are witnessing strength, weakness, or a performance they cannot decode. The less predictable you are, the more others defer, comply, and reveal themselves under the strain of uncertainty. Fear of the unknown is a tool, as powerful as loyalty gained through generosity or authority enforced through decisiveness. This unpredictability is coupled with strategic restraint. Machiavelli emphasized that the skilled ruler does not fight every battle. He does not respond to every slight or insult. He does not expend energy on trivialities. Instead, he observes, analyzes, and selects the moments in which engagement produces maximum advantage. Every unnecessary conflict weakens position. Every delayed response preserves strength. This discipline distinguishes those who rise from those who are consumed by chaos. To act with precision is more potent than to act impulsively. To conserve energy for the decisive moment is more effective than to exhaust it in endless skirmishes. Timing is as vital as action, and the awareness of time transforms reaction into domination. The careful orchestration of relationships becomes the next layer of power. People are rarely allies, they are assets, liabilities, and potential threats. A Machiavellian engages them not with sentiment, but with strategy, evaluating who provides leverage, who offers opportunity, who threatens stability. Loyalty is not assumed but tested, and attachment is transactional, maintained as long as it aligns with strategic advantage. Disloyalty is tolerated only until it threatens position. When it does, it is excised decisively and cleanly. There is no room for emotional attachment in the architecture of influence, only alignment, utility, and control. The mastery of alliances requires understanding human psychology at its most granular level. Each individual acts according to self-interest, fear, desire, and ambition. Recognizing these patterns allows you to engineer interactions so that others act in accordance with your objectives without realizing it. The ambitious will pursue your goals as their own. When given the right incentives, the fearful will submit when provided security. The envious will imitate, undermine, or seek proximity, all of which can be anticipated and leveraged. The world is composed of these predictable mechanisms, and those who see them clearly manipulate them to their advantage, bending events and intentions as an artist bends clay. In parallel, you must cultivate the appearance of morality, empathy, and decency, but never allow them to constrain strategic decision-making. Machiavelli recognized that appearances govern society as much as actions. A ruler who is perceived as just, merciful, and wise gains compliance. One who is perceived as cruel, capricious, or indecisive invites rebellion. Yet these perceptions must be orchestrated, not felt. Generosity, restraint, and favor are tools to be deployed when beneficial. Cruelty, manipulation, and dominance are weapons to be applied when required. The ethical framework is subordinate to strategy, and morality becomes a form of currency rather than a constraint. The control of narrative extends to all forms of communication: spoken word, written message, gesture, and silence. Every interaction communicates intent, strength, and perception. Machiavelli understood that silence is often more powerful than speech. A measured pause can reveal more than an explanation. A withheld comment can provoke more insight than disclosure. People are compelled to fill voids with projection, revealing fears, desires, and motives they would otherwise conceal. Strategic silence, combined with calculated visibility, becomes an instrument of influence that operates beneath awareness, shaping behavior without overt force. Beyond perception and silence lies the mastery of timing in action. Impulse destroys, patience commands. Machiavelli observed that decisive action, executed when conditions are perfect, exerts far more influence than constant engagement. The anticipatory mind observes opportunities, waits for alignment, and strikes with precision. Every hesitation is a threat lost. Every premature move is wasted energy. Control over timing is control over outcomes, and the man who masters it bends events to his will before others realize a struggle has begun. Power also requires the calibration of fear and admiration. Too much fear produces rebellion. Too much admiration produces complacency. The optimal balance generates influence without instability. Those around you act out of respect, desire, or caution, and their responses are predictable when calibrated carefully. Machiavelli observed that the most effective rulers inspired both respect and a touch of apprehension, ensuring that obedience was voluntary, compliance was deliberate, and loyalty endured even in uncertainty. This psychological tension, admiration tempered with fear, becomes a stabilizing force, a foundation upon which all strategic action rests. Control of perception, silence, timing, alliances, and presence converges into an operational mastery over the social environment. You no longer move reactively, you move strategically. Events, conversations, and interactions become instruments rather than obstacles. People cease to act as independent variables and become elements within a larger orchestration. And this is where the ascent deepens, for once you manipulate external forces skillfully, the psychological power over others begins to feed upon itself. Your influence grows exponentially, not through aggression alone, but through anticipation, perception, and subtle orchestration. The lessons embedded in this stage of ascent are not theoretical, they are brutal in their clarity. Misreading a single motive, ignoring a subtle shift in alliance, or revealing a weakness too early can reverse progress instantly. Every action carries consequence. Every silence conveys meaning. Every gesture is evaluated, consciously or unconsciously, by those who orbit your sphere of influence. Machiavelli observed that in the modern world as much as in the courts of Renaissance Italy, the margin between triumph and disaster is razor-thin, measured not in grand gestures but in micro-decisions executed with perfect awareness. And yet, the most dangerous element remains the human heart, the hearts of others, full of envy, fear, ambition, and desire, and the heart within yourself, capable of being swayed, tempted, or corrupted. Internal mastery and external dominance must proceed in tandem. The man who controls others but cannot command himself is a tyrant waiting for downfall. The man who controls himself but cannot manipulate perception or environment remains impotent. True Machiavellian power arises only when the mind, the presence, the perception, the network, and the timing converge into a single unassailable force. By internalizing these principles, you begin to operate differently in every interaction. People who once intimidated you appear predictable. People who once manipulated you now act according to patterns you have anticipated. Allies behave as elements of strategy, not emotion. Rivals reveal themselves through predictable impulses. And in this clarity you discover the forbidden insight that underpins all mastery. Human behavior, though complex, is measurable, and every response can be anticipated, every desire leveraged and every weakness exploited without cruelty unless necessary, without effort unless demanded, and without exposure unless strategically beneficial. At this stage, the world itself begins to reflect your command. Conversations unfold on your terms, opportunities align with your objectives, and influence radiates outward in ways subtle but undeniable. The individual who once struggled against circumstance now manipulates circumstance itself. And yet, Machiavelli warns that even here, vigilance is imperative. Those who orbit your sphere may seek to disrupt your trajectory. Allies may betray, rivals may conspire, and perception may shift. To maintain dominance, observation, timing, and strategic ambiguity must continue to be applied rigorously as each day presents a new battlefield, a new set of variables, and a new set of human impulses that must be navigated with precision. There is a moment in the rise of influence when the internal mastery you have cultivated begins to manifest in the external world. It is subtle at first, almost imperceptible, yet unmistakable to those with attuned perception. People begin to notice that something in you has shifted, though they cannot name it. Some feel unsettled, some feel drawn, some feel compelled to defer. This is not the result of intimidation alone or charisma in isolation. It is the tangible effect of internal clarity radiating outward, an invisible authority that reshapes dynamics before action is even taken. Machiavelli observed that power is never declared. It is sensed, internalized by observers, and obeyed instinctively. Those who recognize it instinctively align. Those who resist it reveal their intentions. The first manifestation of this external influence is the careful control of environment. Territory is no longer measured in land or title, but in psychological space. The spaces you inhabit, the energy you allow into your mind, the standards you enforce, all form the architecture of dominance. Most people drift, shaped by the turbulence around them, reacting to events rather than shaping them. The Machiavellian reverses this flow. He shapes his environment with surgical precision, ensuring that conditions are always favorable to his objectives. Every room entered, every conversation initiated, every decision observed is an extension of his internal order. Those who fail to control their environment are buffeted by circumstance. Those who master it bend circumstance to their will. Presence becomes the first instrument of influence, not flamboyant or aggressive, but grounded, deliberate, and magnetic. Movement is intentional. Voice is measured. Gaze is unwavering. People do not respect the loudest in the room. They respect the one who does not need to assert presence because it exists inherently. A steady posture, a calm voice, a deliberate pause. These are the markers of authority. When others notice this, they respond instinctively, adjusting behavior to the gravitational pull you exert. This presence is invisible dominance, the quiet force that commands attention without demanding it. Next is mastery over information. Knowledge in isolation is powerless. Applied strategically, it becomes leverage. Machiavelli emphasized that those who control information control outcomes. Reveal too much, and others gain insight into your strategy. Reveal too little, and opportunity slips into chaos. The ideal is selective disclosure, just enough to influence, enough to guide perception, but never enough to expose vulnerability. The strategic thinker observes who seeks information, who offers it, who withholds it, and why. By analyzing patterns of disclosure, one can anticipate decisions, predict behavior, and manipulate outcomes with minimal effort. Those around you reveal themselves through what they say, what they conceal, and how they react to the information they are given. But influence alone is insufficient without the selective engagement of conflict. Machiavelli recognized that the skilled strategist chooses battles with precision. Soldiers react, rulers select. Responding to every slight, every challenge, every insult, exhausts energy and reveals weakness. Engaging only when decisive advantage can be achieved preserves resources and amplifies impact. Timing, not frequency, defines the effectiveness of action. The ability to withhold response, to retreat strategically, to strike decisively, transforms every interaction into leverage. Those who engage impulsively are trapped by circumstance. Those who engage strategically become architects of outcome. Unpredictability functions as a protective force. Predictable individuals are easily exploited. Inscrutable individuals are difficult to anticipate and therefore dangerous. Deviations in behavior, alternations of warmth and cold, patience and decisive action create uncertainty in observers, compelling them to project, to speculate, to reveal intentions. Strategic unpredictability destabilizes potential adversaries and reinforces authority. It ensures that no one can comfortably anticipate your moves, and in doing so, protects your ascent from interference. Strategic alliances constitute the next layer of power. Relationships are not emotional constructs, but instruments of advantage. Loyalty grounded in sentiment collapses under pressure. Loyalty grounded in mutual benefit endures. Carefully selecting allies, understanding their ambitions, fears, and insecurities, and placing them where their actions serve your strategy is a skill few master. Machiavelli understood that those closest to you can be most dangerous. Proximity amplifies opportunity, but also exposure. To navigate this, one must measure trust, assess utility, and remain ready to sever connections when alignment no longer serves strategic objectives. Emotional attachment is a liability. Calculated alignment is an asset. The calibration of perception and narrative is critical. People rarely respond to reality, they respond to perception of reality. By controlling the narrative, you influence behavior indirectly, shaping belief, expectation, and action. This involves projecting strength, stability, decisiveness, and confidence, even when internal doubts exist. Silence, gestures, timing, and selective communication become tools to manipulate how others perceive your intentions, capabilities, and resolve. By mastering narrative control, you ensure that others act within the frame you establish, responding to the reality you construct rather than attempting to dictate outcomes through force alone. Internal discipline underpins all external mastery. Those who command others without self-control eventually succumb to the very forces they seek to dominate. Emotions, if left unchecked, become vulnerabilities. Desires, if unrestrained, become distractions. Impulses, if indulged, become traps. The Machiavellian maintains a constant awareness of inner states, managing fear, desire, and anger to prevent them from undermining strategy. Internal mastery and external influence operate as a single mechanism. Imbalance in either compromises both. Only through the harmonization of mind, presence, and perception can true dominance emerge. The interplay of fear and admiration is pivotal. Excessive fear provokes rebellion. Excessive admiration encourages complacency. Optimal influence arises from a subtle balance, a combination of respect and cautious apprehension, charisma tempered with unpredictability, presence fortified by mystery. Those around you act not because of coercion, but because of alignment with instinctive responses. Fear is not punishment, it is recognition of power. Admiration is not idolization, it is acknowledgement of competence. When combined, they produce influence that endures beyond circumstance. resilient against manipulation, and resilient against attrition. Machiavelli's observations extend to subtle manipulation of behavior. By understanding the predictable impulses of others, ambition, envy, desire, fear, one can arrange circumstances so that people act in accordance with strategic objectives without overt coercion. The ambitious pursue objectives aligned with yours. The fearful seek security that you provide. The insecure crave validation which you control. The envious position themselves in proximity to power you wield. Each interaction, each arrangement, each perceived opportunity becomes a lever, bending others toward outcomes you design. Influence is enacted not through force, but through anticipation and orchestration, turning human predictability into a tool of domination. All these elements converge in the cultivation of presence as a constant gravitational force. As mastery over perception, silence, timing, alliances, and internal discipline coalesce, you become a nexus of influence, a pivot around which circumstances rotate. Events occur not in spite of you, but in alignment with the patterns you have established. The world itself bends to the strategic calculus of your actions, reactions, and inactions. Observers respond predictably, even when unaware of the forces guiding them, because your command over internal and external dynamics has created conditions that shape behavior as surely as tides shape the shore. Yet even at this stage, vigilance remains essential. Those within your sphere may harbor ambitions, grudges, or envy. Allies may falter under pressure. Adversaries may strike subtly. Perception may shift unpredictably. Maintaining dominance requires continuous observation, adaptation, and refinement. Every action is a test. Every silence is a gauge. Every alliance is a measurement. Strategy is never complete, and influence is never static. The world constantly evolves, and the Machiavellian must evolve faster. Ultimately, the lessons embedded in this stage reveal a deeper truth. Human behavior, though complex and emotionally driven, is profoundly predictable when analyzed with clarity and applied with precision. To rise, one must see the patterns beneath the chaos, anticipate actions before they are taken, and manipulate the flow of events without exposure or misstep. Influence is not a function of strength or wealth alone. It is a synthesis of perception, timing, internal mastery, and strategic orchestration. Those who grasp this ascend. Those who fail remain prey to circumstance and the ambitions of others. By internalizing these principles, the Machiavellian becomes an architect of outcomes rather than a participant in randomness. Conversations, alliances, gestures, and silences are transformed into instruments of influence. Rivals expose themselves through predictable impulses. Allies act in accordance with strategic alignment. The world becomes a reflection of disciplined observation, precise action, and calibrated presence. And in this clarity, one discovers a forbidden truth. The mechanisms of human behavior are not mysteries but machines, and mastery of them transforms survival into dominance, vulnerability into power, and perception into reality. The fourth lesson emerges not from the battlefield or the throne room, but from the quiet spaces where ambition hides, where intentions whisper beneath false smiles, where alliances pretend to be bonds yet rot like fruit left too long in the sun. Machiavelli understood that the world is not divided into friend or enemy, but into those who can serve your ascent and those who can sabotage it. And perhaps the most dangerous of all are the ones who do neither openly. These are the individuals who move beneath your awareness, whose motives stay veiled, who applaud your victories while sharpening their knives in private. To navigate power, Machiavelli believed, you must develop a sense sharper than sight, sharper than instinct, sharper than anything you could ever articulate. It is the art of reading the invisible currents beneath people's words. And the deeper you go into this dark philosophy, the more you recognize a brutal truth. Intentions are the most expensive currency, and most have none worth trusting. The lesson begins in the shadowed corridors of Florence, where Machiavelli watched diplomats speak as if every phrase were a firework of sincerity, only to reverse themselves the next morning, as if their loyalties were leaves scattered by the wind. He noted the ease with which people shift, how quickly they bend to power, how they disguise weakness as virtue, how they cloak envy as moral concern. Human beings, he wrote, are inconstant by nature, and the man who forgets this condemns himself to ruin. But to internalize this lesson is not merely to distrust others, it is to perceive the world in a different wavelength, to see people as moving pieces with shifting centers of gravity, and to understand that the most dangerous threats were the softest expressions. Imagine for a moment someone in your own orbit, someone who has always nodded at your ideas, who compliments your work, who shows interest at convenient moments, who listens with almost too much enthusiasm. They appear harmless, supportive even. But Machiavelli would ask, do they admire your strength, or do they simply attach themselves to it? Do they encourage you out of genuine loyalty, or because your rise gives them a vantage point they could never achieve on their own? Behind these questions lies a principle so unsettling that most people would rather deny it. Not everyone around you is aligned with your success, and many are aligned with it only as long as it serves them. In this forbidden lesson, Machiavelli urges a higher form of observation, not paranoia but strategic perception. You watch not what people say, but what they repeat. You note not their enthusiasm, but what makes them uncomfortable. You observe who they defend, who they avoid, who they secretly envy. Envy, Machiavelli believed, is the true enemy of the successful man, for envy disguises itself in the language of advice, morality, even affection. It speaks softly, but its intentions are acidic. It suggests hesitation when you need resolve. It warns you of risks that do not exist. It encourages modesty when aggression is required. It tells you to compromise when you should dominate. And it coils itself in your ear until you mistake its voice for your own. This lesson becomes clearer when you consider how power shifts within any environment. When someone rises too quickly, the world around them moves like stirred water. Faces change, alliances loosen, and seemingly loyal companions begin recalculating their proximity to you. Some approach you more often, offering help you didn't ask for. Others distance themselves, claiming to give you space while secretly shielding their insecurities. And a few behave unpredictably, acting cold one day and warm the next, signaling that your ascent disrupts the balance they once relied on. Machiavelli observed all of this with a clinical precision, noting that human beings are less predictable in moments of prosperity than in moments of hardship. It is when you succeed that their true nature reveals itself. He believed you should welcome these revelations, not fear them. For in power, clarity is worth more than loyalty. A disloyal man is predictable once exposed. A disloyal man pretending to be loyal is the true poison. So Machiavelli taught a principle that sounds cruel but is, in reality, the backbone of strategic survival. You do not need to force loyalty from people. You need only to create the conditions under which their real intentions appear. In this way, the world reveals itself without your hand ever touching it. To understand this lesson on a deeper psychological level, imagine that every person carries a concealed ledger, detailing what they value, what they fear, what they lack, what they secretly desire. Most keep this ledger locked because exposing it would reveal their weaknesses, and people guard weakness more fiercely than they guard treasure. But Machiavelli was fascinated by how easily individuals betray their own secrets through emotional pressure. Not coercion, pressure. A shadow of uncertainty, a small delay, a subtle withdrawal of attention, a hesitation placed at the perfect moment. If applied precisely, such pressure unmasks the hearts of even the most guarded. A man with genuine loyalty does not break under silence or uncertainty. A man driven by ulterior motives does. This was one of Machiavelli's most controversial insights, one history tried to bury, one governments have quietly used for centuries. You do not learn someone's loyalty by rewarding them. You learn it by observing how they behave when the reward is not offered. You test not by giving, but by withholding. You reveal not by asking, but by remaining silent. If someone's loyalty collapses without feeding, it was never loyalty, only appetite. And this is where the lesson turns darker. Because to master this kind of perception, you must detach emotionally from the illusion of people's consistency. You must accept that the majority of relationships are transactional, that affection often conceals rivalry, and that admiration can mask resentment. Machiavelli believed it is better to see the world clearly than to live comforted by delusions. But clarity is not warm, it is cold. It removes the softness from human nature and replaces it with truth. And truth, once seen, cannot be unseen. Consider the leaders who fell not because of their enemies, but because of those closest to them. Caesar did not fall from the hands of strangers. He fell to the blade of a man he once considered family. Many kings were betrayed by advisors they trusted too deeply. Many generals died not on the battlefield but in their own halls, surrounded by supposed allies. Machiavelli catalogued these tragedies not as moral lessons, but as strategic warnings. The closer someone stands to you, the easier it is for them to strike. Therefore, closeness must be earned, not granted freely. This does not mean to push the world away. It means you remain the one who chooses who gets near you, and why. It means you move through the world with deliberate understanding rather than naive acceptance. It means you study motives as if they were maps, guiding you through the terrain of human psychology. Machiavelli believed that true power requires something most people lack: the ability to see people as they are, not as you wish them to be. This skill is the dividing line between those who rise and those who collapse beneath betrayal. But seeing people clearly is only the first half of the lesson. The second is even more dangerous. Once you see their motives, you must learn to shape them. This is where Machiavellian power becomes almost surgical. It is not enough to understand what drives people. You must use that knowledge to position them where they benefit your strategy. You do not manipulate with force. You manipulate by placing people in environments that activate their predictable behaviors. The greedy seek opportunity. The fearful seek security. The ambitious seek elevation. The insecure seek validation. The envious seek proximity to what they cannot achieve. Once you know which of these threads pulls a person, you can predict their moves with unsettling accuracy. A person driven by fear will cling to you if you provide certainty. A person driven by ambition will serve you if you provide advancement. A person driven by insecurity will idolize you if you provide approval. A person driven by envy will imitate you, undermine you, or resent you, but they cannot ignore you. And through these predictable patterns, Machiavelli saw that human beings were not mysteries, but mechanisms. Complex, yes. Emotional, yes. But mechanisms nonetheless. The most powerful individuals understood this instinctively. They knew how to project strength when it benefited them, vulnerability when it was strategic, generosity when it manipulated gratitude, indifference when it provoked attention, and silence when it forced others to reveal themselves. Every action was deliberate, calculated, purpose-driven. Nothing was done casually. To live without strategy, Machiavelli argued, is to become a pawn in someone else's. But there is a darker dimension still. It is the understanding that you must guard your own desires, weaknesses, and intentions just as closely as others guard theirs. To expose your inner world is to give others a map to influence you. To reveal your fears is to offer them a weapon. To display your ambitions openly is to invite sabotage. Power belongs to the one whose heart remains unreadable, whose emotions appear controlled, whose motives stay elusive. Silence becomes a form of dominance. Reserve becomes armor. Opacity becomes a shield. This is why Machiavelli wrote that a ruler must learn to cultivate a certain dual nature, the ability to appear transparent while remaining impenetrable. The world sees only what you allow. They believe only what you permit. They assume based on the fragments you provide, never realizing how carefully curated those fragments are. And in this way, you hold the advantage not through deception alone, but through strategic ambiguity. When people cannot read you, they cannot predict you. When they cannot predict you, they cannot undermine you. When they cannot undermine you, they fear you, respect you, or align with you. This lesson intensifies when applied to moments of conflict. Most people reveal their strategy by reacting emotionally, by responding instantly, by arguing, defending, proving, explaining. Machiavelli insisted that the more powerful move is to withdraw into silence at the precise moment others expect an eruption. Silence confuses the aggressive, it frustrates the manipulative, it destabilizes the insecure, it makes the arrogant doubt their assumptions, and it leaves the envious choking on their own projections. When used correctly, silence is not the absence of power, it is the presence of superior control. And now the narrative turns to the most forbidden form of this lesson: managing illusions. Machiavelli understood that perception has more influence than truth. People respond not to reality, but to the version of reality they believe. A leader who appears confident is followed, even if he is uncertain. A man who appears valuable is respected, even if his achievements are modest. A figure who appears untouchable is feared, even if he is fragile internally. Perception shapes the world more forcefully than fact, and those who control perception control influence, loyalty, and fear. Yet this is where the danger lies. For in controlling perception, you must never become intoxicated by your own illusion. You must maintain an internal world that remains separate from the way others see you. Those who fall into their own narrative become blind. Those who believe their own myth become careless. Those who absorb their followers' admiration become soft. Machiavelli warned that the man who believes he is invincible ceases to defend himself. The man who believes he is beloved ceases to analyze loyalty. The man who believes he is wise stops learning. And this is the moment where power collapses. So the forbidden lesson is this: construct illusions for others, but never for yourself. And beneath all of this, beneath the psychology, the strategy, the manipulation, lies an even deeper principle. It is not about dominating others. It is not about deceiving the world. It is about protecting your trajectory, your ascent, your future, your impact. Machiavelli believed that those who play without awareness are devoured. Those who play without strategy are disposable. Those who trust blindly are replaced. But those who master perception, intention, ambiguity, and human motive carve a path through the world that others cannot block. They become storms that cannot be stalled, shadows that cannot be cornered, forces that cannot be predicted. This lesson is called banned for a reason, not because it is immoral, but because it strips away the illusions that society relies on to keep people compliant. It teaches you that the world does not reward sincerity, it rewards strategy. It shows you that loyalty is rare, envy is common, and clarity is power. It reveals that people are infinitely more predictable than they pretend, and it shapes you into someone who moves differently, slower in reaction, sharper in perception, deeper in understanding, and stronger in influence. When you reach this stage of Machiavellian awareness, you feel the world shift. Conversations become maps, expressions become signals, silences become confessions, motives become visible, and every interaction strengthens your mastery, because every interaction teaches you who is aligned, who is useful, who is dangerous, and who must never be allowed to stand too close. And so this fourth lesson continues endlessly into your perception, reshaping the way you see every person in your life. Those who once intimidated you now appear transparent. Those who once manipulated you now seem predictable. Those who once deceived you now look clumsy in their attempts. You begin to feel a kind of calm dominance, not arrogance, but clarity. And clarity is the birthplace of strategic power. With the lessons of perception, control, and the human psyche now internalized, the next stage of Machiavellian mastery emerges: the orchestration of influence on a grand scale. By now, the foundations have been laid: the understanding of human predictability, the disciplined mastery of self, the cultivation of presence, the manipulation of perception, and the subtle orchestration of alliances. Yet these are only preparatory steps. True strategic power manifests not in isolated interactions, but in the ability to engineer complex systems of influence, where multiple threads of human behavior intersect and converge toward your objectives without conscious resistance. Machiavelli observed that only those who can think several moves ahead, who can visualize the chessboard of society in its entirety, can escape the pitfalls that ensnare the ambitious yet short-sighted. At this stage, subtlety becomes an instrument of domination. A word spoken, a silence maintained, a glance exchanged, all become vectors through which influence flows. Machiavelli noted that the world is governed by appearances as much as by actions, and those who fail to manipulate appearances are constantly reacting to circumstances rather than shaping them. To operate at this level, you must internalize a principle few. Understand, the visible world is merely a reflection of the invisible currents you have cultivated. Every gesture you allow, every interaction you permit, every narrative you shape is an extension of these currents. And mastery comes from recognizing how each small action contributes to a larger design, a web of influence that others cannot perceive until it is too late. One of the most powerful tools at this stage is the deliberate cultivation of dependency. People act predictably when they are reliant upon you for resources, validation, or opportunity. Machiavelli emphasized that a ruler or strategist must identify points of dependence in every relationship and leverage them strategically. The dependent become instruments without realizing it, their decisions guided by invisible forces aligned with your objectives. Yet dependency must be crafted carefully. Too much, and resentment festers. Too little, and influence wanes. The skilled practitioner balances control with utility, creating relationships where others perceive freedom even as they move along paths you have subtly defined. Timing continues to be paramount. The Machiavellian recognizes that every action carries consequences beyond the immediate moment. Decisions taken without consideration of long-term impact are shallow. Decisions delayed too long lose potency. Each maneuver, an intervention in conversation, a display of generosity, a withdrawal of attention, must be precisely calibrated to the context, the individuals involved, and the broader trajectory of influence. Those who cannot grasp the interplay between timing and perception remain ensnared by reaction rather than action, while those who do become architects of events themselves. The orchestration of influence also relies heavily on the control of narrative. Machiavelli noted that human beings interpret events not objectively, but through the lens of perception. Therefore, shaping the lens is more effective than changing the facts. Every interaction, every decision, every movement can be framed to reinforce your strategic position. You become the author of reality in the minds of others, guiding their judgments, expectations, and behaviors. Subtle reframing of events can convert opposition into alignment, challenge into opportunity, and threat into leverage. Those who perceive the world as you shape it are already aligned with your objectives before they realize it. Strategic aggression emerges at this stage, but it is calculated, not impulsive. Machiavelli observed that hesitation invites encroachment and weakness invites exploitation. Yet aggression must be selective and purposeful. An impulsive strike destabilizes the practitioner, while a calculated strike consolidates influence, eliminates threats, and strengthens perceived authority. Decisiveness, particularly when others are uncertain, signals competence and dominance. By striking at the precise moment, often subtly, often concealed, you reinforce both control and perception, ensuring that your authority is acknowledged without overt confrontation. This is also the stage at which manipulation becomes an art of psychological layering. Human behavior is rarely a single impulse. It is a lattice of desire, fear, envy, ambition, and insecurity. Machiavelli recognized that influence grows exponentially when these layers are simultaneously engaged. By creating circumstances that activate multiple impulses, you ensure that actions taken by others serve your objectives in ways they do not consciously recognize. An ambitious person may act to advance themselves, yet in doing so, they advance your interests. A fearful person may seek security, inadvertently complying with your strategy. An envious person may seek proximity, unintentionally revealing weaknesses. The interplay of human motives becomes a symphony you conduct with precision. Observation, by now, is elevated to almost preternatural acuity. Machiavelli stressed that those who command influence must be vigilant in detecting deviations from expectation. Microexpressions, subtle hesitation, changes in posture, tone, or gaze, all signal shifts in intention. Those who ignore these signals risk being blindsided, while those who interpret them correctly can anticipate actions, redirect behavior, and preempt threats. At this stage, the practitioner becomes less reactive and more anticipatory, reading not just the words and gestures of others, but the architecture of their desires, fears, and ambitions. Control of proximity and access is equally vital. People can influence you as readily as you influence them. Machiavelli noted that even the most loyal allies may become liabilities if they gain unchecked access to your vulnerabilities. Strategic distance allows observation, measurement, and control. It ensures that loyalty is earned, not assumed, and that influence remains two-sided. You guide others, but you also maintain autonomy over the forces around you. Access is a tool. Proximity is power. Both must be managed consciously. All of these elements converge in a subtle psychological warfare that is both invisible and irresistible. The Machiavellian practitioner at this stage manipulates without aggression, dominates without visibility, and commands influence without the appearance of effort. People act in accordance with strategy because it aligns with their nature, because it activates desires or fears they cannot resist, because it presents opportunities they perceive as autonomous. And in this orchestration, victory is achieved not through confrontation, but through design, through the meticulous shaping of context, perception, and human behavior. Yet mastery at this level carries the weight of constant vigilance. Even a single misstep, a misjudged gesture, an untimely disclosure, a lapse in observation, can unravel the careful web of influence. Machiavelli insisted that no system, however elegant, survives neglect. Strategy requires relentless attention. Every interaction, every signal, every narrative, and every silence must be continuously monitored, refined, and calibrated. Complacency is the enemy of power, vigilance is its ally. At this point, the practitioner also begins to manipulate the flow of opportunity. Those around you move through patterns you have anticipated. Events unfold within corridors you have defined. The Machiavellian recognizes that control is not just reactive, it is proactive. By shaping circumstances before they arise, by arranging interactions, resources, and incentives in advance, you convert potential chaos into structured advantage. Opportunity ceases to be a chance event. It becomes a predictable outcome of deliberate orchestration. Those who fail to anticipate are caught by circumstance. Those who anticipate become masters of circumstance itself. Machiavelli also emphasizes the selective use of vulnerability as a tool. Appearances of openness, hesitancy, or uncertainty can provoke miscalculations from rivals, draw in allies who underestimate your strength, or generate overconfidence that becomes exploitable. Strategic exposure, when combined with the previously established mastery of observation, timing, and perception, reinforces influence by creating situations in which others act to your advantage without conscious understanding. In this way, vulnerability transforms into leverage, a subtle psychological instrument of domination. The cultivation of fear and respect is intensified at this stage. While admiration draws followers, fear ensures compliance. The most effective practitioners of influence balance these forces meticulously. Fear must never become hatred. Respect must never become complacency. Machiavelli observed that the ruler who fails to maintain this balance loses authority, while the one who calibrates it accurately secures obedience, loyalty, and cautious reverence. This psychological equilibrium sustains long-term influence, even amidst shifting alliances, competitive pressures, or unforeseen challenges. The final dimension of this stage is the orchestration of perception at scale. Influence now extends beyond immediate interactions to entire networks, communities, or organizations. Reputation is managed strategically. Narratives are controlled across multiple layers. Appearances are aligned with strategic objectives. Those within your sphere respond predictably because their environment has been subtly engineered to guide behavior. Influence, once localized, becomes systemic. Machiavelli recognized that the practitioner who can extend this orchestration outward achieves a form of power that is structural, not transient, a force embedded in the mechanisms of human behavior itself. At this juncture, the practitioner achieves a rare and dangerous insight. True power is rarely seen in brute force or dominance. It is found in anticipation, in orchestration, in the unseen manipulation of incentives, perceptions, and impulses. The world bends not because it is compelled, but because it is conditioned. Those who act around you align themselves with patterns you have constructed, often believing their compliance is self-directed. And in this, the Machiavellian discovers a profound satisfaction. Influence achieved without confrontation is infinitely more enduring and more psychologically complete than that imposed through aggression alone. But mastery at this level is perilous. The mind must remain sharp, detached, and disciplined. Alliances must be continuously evaluated. Behaviors must be continuously read. Narratives must be continuously maintained. Misjudgment, fatigue, or overconfidence can unravel even the most sophisticated web of influence. And Machiavelli warned that the ascent of power carries a shadow. The higher you rise, the more dangerous the currents around you, and the more ruthless you must become to maintain equilibrium. This stage is, in essence, the culmination of psychological strategy. Observation, perception, timing, narrative control, alliance management, influence engineering, and systemic orchestration converge to create a level of dominance few achieve and fewer maintain. Those who reach this point see the world differently. Interactions are calculated opportunities, behaviors are predictable patterns, and every engagement becomes an instrument of strategic purpose. The Machiavellian, now operating at this level, moves through society not as a participant, but as a director, shaping outcomes with invisible precision, commanding attention, loyalty, and compliance without overt assertion. And yet, Machiavelli's greatest warning accompanies this stage. The pursuit of influence must never blind the practitioner to reality. Awareness, detachment, and continuous evaluation remain essential. The tools of control are potent, but they can be turned against the inattentive. Observation must remain vigilant. Timing must remain precise. Perception must remain managed. Power is both liberating and fragile. Mastery is both exhilarating and dangerous. Those who achieve it find themselves in a world of infinite possibility, yet always on a knife's edge, where a single miscalculation can unravel decades of strategic work. At this final stage, the Machiavellian ascends to a realm few ever perceive, let alone inhabit. The mind, honed through relentless observation, discipline, and strategic orchestration, now interprets the world as a network of cause and effect, desire and fear, opportunity and risk. Every interaction, every glance, every silence is no longer random. It is data, insight, leverage. You exist simultaneously within the world and above it, a presence that influences the flow of events before it materializes, shaping outcomes not with force, but with the precision of a master tactician. Yet this is not a place of comfort. It is a domain of constant vigilance, where complacency is lethal and every shadow could conceal an adversary. At this level, perception becomes reality, and you control the lens through which others view the world. Machiavelli's most dangerous insight is now tangible. People respond to what they believe, not what is. The ambitious act when they believe opportunity exists. The fearful comply when they believe threat is present. The envious imitate when they perceive advantage. By calibrating these perceptions, you orchestrate behavior without confrontation. Influence becomes structural, extending beyond individuals to entire systems, networks, and societies. The world itself bends toward your strategy, yet none of those within it understand that their alignment was orchestrated, not incidental. Strategic ambiguity now becomes your ally. By revealing only what serves your objectives and concealing the rest, you maintain an aura of inscrutability. Others project intentions, fears, and expectations onto you, unaware that you're reading them in return. Your silence is as potent as your words. Your absence carries more weight than your presence. Machiavelli teaches that invisibility in motive, clarity in execution, and precision in action are more effective than any show of strength. The unseen hand guides the world far more effectively than the visible one ever could. Every relationship is now a matrix of influence. Allies, rivals, and observers alike operate within parameters you define subtly, their actions predictable, their choices anticipated. Those who might challenge you are either aligned through desire, contained through fear, or exposed through their own impulses. Machiavelli's principles converge here. Perception, timing, observation, narrative control, and human psychology function as a single system, each component reinforcing the others, creating dominance that is both invisible and absolute. But absolute power at this stage is not measured by fear, wealth, or titles alone. It is measured by the ability to remain untouchable, to operate above manipulation while directing it in others. True mastery is the convergence of internal control and external orchestration. The mind that is unshakable, the presence that commands instinctively, the influence that guides behavior without overt action, all exist simultaneously in harmony. Here, power is not asserted. It is experienced, recognized, and deferred to. Those around you comply because resistance is futile, not because it is forced. Yet vigilance must remain constant. Machiavelli warns that the higher one rises, the sharper the scrutiny, the greater the stakes, and the more lethal the rivals. Observation never ceases, timing must be perpetually calibrated, and perception must be continuously managed. The slightest misstep, a misjudged word, an untimely revelation, a lapse in attention, can unravel the entire structure of influence painstakingly built over years. Mastery is a balance between expansion and preservation, between control and observation, between engagement and withdrawal. It is a living, breathing process that demands both patience and decisiveness, detachment and calculated passion. At this apex, the art of fear and respect is perfected. Those who admire you comply because they recognize skill. Those who fear you defer because they sense consequence. The equilibrium between these forces is neither static nor symbolic. It is dynamic, adaptive, responsive to every ripple in the environment. Machiavelli understood that loyalty, once earned superficially, is fragile, but loyalty conditioned through careful perception management, opportunity control, and psychological alignment endures. The combination of admiration and apprehension produces influence that is resilient, far-reaching, and self-reinforcing. Now, influence is exercised at a level so subtle that most perceive it as inevitability. Conversations unfold. According to the frameworks you have defined, alliances reinforce strategic positions without conscious awareness. Rivals act in ways that inadvertently secure your objectives. Even chance events, those unpredictable elements that seem beyond control, are anticipated through careful orchestration of circumstance, timing, and incentive. You have transformed the unpredictable into the manageable, the chaotic into the ordered, the reactive into the proactive. Machiavellian mastery is no longer a series of techniques. It is a state of being, a mode of cognition, a lens through which the world is continuously understood, shaped, and guided. Yet with this power comes responsibility, not moral but practical. Those who fail to act decisively at this stage risk stagnation or regression. Influence must be maintained, conditions continually optimized, and perception constantly recalibrated. The network of human behavior you manipulate is dynamic. It responds, evolves, and resists. Only through continuous engagement, disciplined observation, and strategic intervention can the apex of influence be preserved. To hesitate is to invite exploitation. To act impulsively is to invite chaos. Balance, timing, and awareness remain the defining traits of continued dominance. Machiavelli's ultimate insight now reveals itself fully. Mastery of self is inseparable from mastery of others. The internal mind, disciplined and untouchable by fear, desire, or distraction, serves as the foundation for external influence. Emotional control, patience, analytical acuity, and the ability to detach from fleeting attachments allow the practitioner to operate without vulnerability. When internal mastery and external orchestration align, influence becomes near absolute. Those around you respond to signals, patterns, and cues you engineer, yet never fully realize that their reality has been guided by your design. Here, in the culmination of strategy, the Machiavellian confronts the final paradox: to wield influence invisibly yet decisively, to manipulate subtly yet powerfully, to ascend relentlessly while remaining grounded, unexposed, and impervious to betrayal. The art is no longer in small maneuvers or isolated interactions. It is in the continuous shaping of the social, psychological, and perceptual environment. Every thought, decision, silence, and gesture becomes a vector through which your power radiates. You are everywhere, yet nowhere, present yet untouchable, commanding yet invisible. And now comes the ultimate call to action, the forbidden directive hidden in plain sight. Do not linger in complacency. The world is a battlefield of perception, desire, envy, and ambition. Those who hesitate are consumed by circumstance. Those who wait for opportunity are left behind by those who create it. You have learned the machinery of influence, the architecture of dominance, the subtle calculus of human psychology. You have observed, calculated, and internalized the principles that govern success, loyalty, fear, and respect. And now it is time to act. Step into the world with eyes unclouded by illusion, with mind sharpened by observation, with presence calibrated to command, with influence extended in every direction. Shape perception deliberately, orchestrate circumstances strategically, and guide human behavior with relentless precision. Fear is your instrument. Respect your armor, perception your battlefield, and silence your weapon. Engage fully, act decisively, and move with the awareness that every microaction carries consequences in the macrocosm of your ascent. Do not surrender to morality as a restraint when it limits effectiveness, nor to sentimentality when it invites vulnerability. Harness both as tools to guide others, while preserving clarity, detachment, and focus within yourself. The world rewards the calculated, the vigilant, the disciplined, the relentless. Those who rise are those who see clearly, act decisively, and manipulate outcomes invisibly. Those who falter are those who cling to illusions, trust blindly, or underestimate the subtle forces that govern human behavior. The Machiavellian path is not for the timid. It is not for those who fear solitude, scrutiny, or the weight of responsibility. It is for those willing to see the world as it is, not as they wish it to be, to act without hesitation, without moral distortion, and without distraction, to harness the full spectrum of human psychology, perception, and influence in pursuit of mastery. Stand now, observe relentlessly, act decisively, command without exposure, bend reality through perception, timing, and strategic orchestration. Become untouchable, unassailable, and undeniable. Rise, not merely to exist, but to dominate the currents of human behavior, to shape outcomes invisibly, to extend influence where others see chaos, and to forge a trajectory of power that is both inevitable and absolute. The knowledge is now yours. The strategy is within your grasp. The world awaits the force of a mind unrelenting, a presence uncompromising, a hand that guides without being seen. Move forward, and let nothing stand unchallenged before the precision of your mastery. The ascent is complete only in action.